World MSMEs Day 2019 centers on contribution of small companies to global economy. Central Bank sustains forex interventions, just as oil prices fall amid concerns over outlook for crude demand. The program is Business Express, reaching you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Welcome. In its commitment to continue to support the interbank foreign exchange market to ensure economic growth, the Central Bank of Nigeria has injected the sum of $210 million in the interbank foreign exchange market. Figures obtained from the CBN indicates that authorized dealers in the wholesale segment of the market were offered the sum of $100 million, while the small and medium enterprises segment received the sum of $55 million on Tuesday. Similarly, customers requiring foreign exchange for invisibles such as tuition fees, medical payments and basic travel allowances, among others, were also allocated the sum of $55 million. The business community has been reacting to the decision by the Central Bank of Nigeria to, in the next 5 years, recapitalize Nigerian banks. Governor of the Central Bank, Godwin Emefiele, earlier this week unfolded the bank's policy direction for the next 5 years and pledged to retain managed float exchange rate. The bank is targeting double-digit growth and single-digit inflation. To this end, various reactions have trailed this development. On recapitalization, it is expected that the bank would jack up the 25 million minimum levels that one of his predecessors, Professor Charles Soludo, introduced in 2004.
That the lending rate will come down a little bit, and right now lending rate at over 20%, it's really hard on businesses, but certainly if that can come down, it's going to encourage economic growth. From figures available, over the past year, I think we've been at about 11.3, 11.25, 11.28. So if that comes down to less than 10%, I think that's a good, a good one for the Nigerian economy. I hope he's able to achieve that.
As the CBN unveils 5-year policy thrusts aimed at supporting Nigeria's macroeconomic growth and development, what is to be expected in the next 5 years? We'll find out with our guests when we return. Professor of Economics Magnus Pakol is ready to share his thoughts on the CBN 5-year monetary policy blueprint rolled out by the governor of the Apex Bank, Godwin Emefiele. Good to have you on Business Express.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here. You're doing a wonderful job.
Thank you very much. Now, looking at the agenda of the governor of the central bank, Godwin Emefiele, how would you rate the performance of the Apex Bank?
Well, I think that they have done a pretty good job over these last 5 years. I think that we would have been in a more precarious situation if not for monetary policy. As we all know, the economy has suffered. We went into recession in 2016, and the only reason we were able to come out was because, in my opinion, of the great job that the CBN did. Because the fiscal sector, even though they tried, didn't really come up to the kind of level that we expected. So overall, I think that they did pretty good. They did as well as we could have probably expected.
What level were you expecting to see?
Well, I thought that, there was a time when the exchange rate got to like 525 naira per dollar. And then we were all scared. I mean, I thought that we were going to raise to like 1,000 naira to the dollar. But I think that through a number of things that they did and the kind of confidence that they were able to bring at a time when the economy was tanking, they did good. So that's why I said, if things were to be allowed to deteriorate, it would have been a very terrible. The recession would have lingered on. We probably could have seen a more U-shaped instead of the V-shaped recession that we had.
Okay.
We probably could have gotten into 2017 with a lot of decline in activity.
Okay, the CBN is talking about recapitalization of banks.
Yeah.
Possibly we could see mergers. How do you see these affecting investor sentiments?
This one is a tricky issue in a way, because personally, I like to also see banks that are sort of tilted towards the community. I have tremendous interest in community activity, and I often don't want a situation where community business people are scared because they think these are monumentally big banks. But I understand what the CBN is trying to do here. When we did the Soludo, the so-called Soludo capitalization, we took it to 25 billion naira, right? And that was, if you did the math, it was close to $250 million. So now, if we use the same 25 billion naira, you're getting something below 70 million naira. So in the eyes of investors, they don't see these banks as global players. They look like small little banks. So on that score, I understand what the central bank governor is trying to do in that regard, and I think is welcome. But what I suggest is that we should also have opportunity for smaller type banks that may be regional, or catering to smaller rural people, so that people are not intimidated. Now, somebody could say we have microfinance banks to do that, but some of the microfinance banks are not strong enough. They look shaky in the eyes of people. You wouldn't want to deposit money in some of the microfinance banks the way we have them today. Okay. There's not a whole lot of confidence in them. So if you had banks that stay in the 20 billion naira range, 15 billion naira range, but they are catering to rural communities or small and medium enterprises in particular locations and localities, it may not be a bad idea.
Okay, in the governor's first term, there was consistent tightening to check inflation. Do you feel this was the desired objective achieved?
The bank, in my opinion, was caught between a rock and a hard place. Because, you had inflation, but you had weak growth. So we had an economy that went into recession. But at the same time, we had inflation that was pretty high, going towards 18%. So, but the number one duty of the central bank is to have price stability. So if I'm the central bank governor, my number one concern would be, how do I bring down inflation? I will let the fiscal side try to figure out how they grow the economy. Because people are going to ask me and say, what is your mandate? And my mandate is to bring down inflation. And so they had to tighten a little bit. It's difficult also to have negative real interest rates. So people kind of were worried with that. So I think that they tried to be sure that you set the, well, I mean, they wanted to be sure that they set interest rates right, that is monetary policy rates right, but not so low that you increase money supply too much and create inflation.
Okay, we have, talking about mandates, we have some school of thought that says the central bank is moving away from its regulatory function by the various interventions. Do you agree with that?
It looks like that on the surface. Well, in terms of core central bank mandate, like I said, their mandate is monetary policy. It looks like they're doing fiscal work. But they had to do some fiscal work at a time when the fiscal sector was lagging behind. What was instructive here to note is that in developing countries, a central bank may use unconventional measures. And I think that that's what they have done. Okay. So we can describe it as still monetary policy, but it's unconventional. It's not a thing that you see most central banks do all the time. Okay. But in a situation where there was serious weakness, then the central bank can resort to development financing in this so-called unconventional method.
Okay, we are yet to get a cabinet for the Buhari administration. Now, if they do come in, what policies would you suggest they should help assist CBN achieve single-digit inflation?
Well, I mean, the fiscal side should not be too worried. I mean, they could be a little concerned. They need to work with the central bank.
Yes.
But if I'm on the fiscal side, I want to stimulate the economy. My thing is to create jobs. And I was happy to read also and to listen to the central bank governor say that he too wants to create jobs and to grow the economy. So they say it's not that easy to lower inflation to single digits at the time when you're trying to create jobs. It means that we have to be realistic and tell the people the truth. The truth of the matter is that we're not producing. Our ability to produce goods and services is weak. And the central bank should come out and say so. They should be bold to say it. It is not their fault. So they should come out and say that the problem they're facing is real constraints, in the real sector. We are facing constraints in the real sector.
So now in closing, what would be the right way to go?
Well, the right way to go is to produce goods and services. That is to have industrial parks. I've heard that the president wants to look in that direction. The president wants to be sure that we can produce goods and services, that we're going to have industrial parks, where there'll be electricity. And when I was talking about constraints in the fact that you don't have the infrastructure, you don't have the mechanism to be able to raise productivity. Let me say this one last thing here, and I want to really say to Nigerians, we are not the poverty capital of the world, as people want to say. We have a lot of poverty, but we're not. There is no such thing as poverty capital of the world. And I think that we just need to produce goods and services, create jobs, and we'll work ourselves out of poverty.
Magnus Pakul, a professor of economics, thank you for joining us on the program. It was indeed a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much. My great pleasure.
Now, moving on, 360,000 direct and indirect farmers from 6 states in the country are to benefit from a memorandum of agreement and action signed between the Nigerian incentive-based risk-sharing system for agricultural lending and agro-processing productivity enhancement and livelihood improvement support, a World Bank-assisted project. Paul Abe reports that NISAL, an arm of Central Bank of Nigeria with a financial base of $500 million, is providing capacity in the agricultural financial value chain and other incentives in the partnership.
The Appeals Project, which started in March 2017 and expected to end in March 2023, is a 6-year project designed in line with the agriculture promotion policy of the federal government, with an intention to build on the legacy of the agricultural transformation agenda. It also plans to support the policy thrust on food security, local production, job creation, and economic diversification, with the support of the World Bank to the tune of $200 million. In tandem with the core mandate of NASAL, the partnership with the non-bank financial institution will further boost the project development objective focused on enhancing agricultural productivity of small and medium-scale farmers and improve value addition along priority value chains in the participating states, which include Lagos, Kaduna, Kano, Enugu, Cross River, and Kogi.
What we want is the capacity to design this project properly, execute it properly, deliver the intended results, and to make it sustainable.
We are going to empower and train and empower the youth and women along their selected areas of entrepreneurship development.
What we are trying to do now is to promote inclusive business development by bringing our smallholder farmers and linking them through a sustainable market model.
The signing, performed during the third implementation support mission of the Appeals project in Calabar, will enable NERSAL provide incentives to include primary processing, transportation, and storage by use of technologies, NERSAL insurance schemes, among others. With the signing of these agreements, it is hoped that farmers in the benefiting states will leverage on this opportunity to improve their income and livelihood. In Calabar, Paul Abel.
Another guest, Obinaya Uriogba, an entrepreneur, personal development expert, joins us in the discussion segment. Again, good to have you join us on the program. Now, we've been talking about the fallout of the briefing of the central bank governor on the way forward in his next tenure. Now, if we are going to look at the policy of MSMEs, what would you say?
Well, on June 5, 2014, the central bank governor, Godwin Emefiele, marshaled out his 5-year plan. Now, again in June, this time around June 25, or thereabout, or 24, he has come up with a new plan, having had his appointment renewed.
Yes.
Now, a bit of a review will show that within the 5 years of his first tenure, he came up with some interventions. His focus was going to be people development, both within the bank and outside. And talking about people development, he tried to look at the MSME sector. Yes. Some of the things he did was the stability of the economy, because he met an economy that nosedived. The price of oil, which is more or less, which makes us a monocultural economy primarily, nosedived to a very deep level. And then, of course, inflation came and we fell into recession. And then to the point where the exchange rate to a dollar went to 525 naira to a dollar. Okay. Now, somehow, within those past 5 years, he's been able to work with his team to stabilize it down to where you have a window, FX window of 305 naira to a dollar to 360 naira. So stabilized for about 27 months now. Now, what that does is that for those in the MSME sector who need to import things to produce, especially things we cannot produce here, it helps them to now access Forex. Now, he has made availability of Forex readily available for the people who need it. Now, he also came up with some interventions. Some of the interventions he came up with was the 220 billion MSME Development Fund, which was focused on the sector that actually grows the economy, which is the MSME sector. Most economies in Asia and some parts of the world are grown by the MSME sector, who employ persons upwards of 2, 3, 5, and so on. Government cannot employ everybody. You know, so to take us away from the monocultural economy we've been running for years, which is oil dependent, 86% of our income most times comes from oil, and then to also shield us from the shocks that happen whenever the price of oil drops, he decided to focus on growing that sector. So he came up with the Anchor Borrower Scheme again, sometime late 2015, and from there the target was to start growing locally made items, and starting with rice, palm oil, and a few other commodities, which incidentally were the mainstay of our economy before this oil thing came on board. And then the target was to have the MSME sector access funding to be able to produce the little things they can produce. Now, move away from there. Okay. He also intervened in some other areas, and then recently came up with the AXMES, the Agri Small Medium Enterprises Investment Scheme, which also gives you access to about $10 million, and then some people get trained, and then they can access, and then they have a window moratorium, and they can pay back within 7 years. Now, by the time all of that access happens, they'll be able to produce and then be able to also sell within the economy. Part of what he also discovered within 5 years, which he wants to take in these second 5 years, is also the fact that 43 items were banned. We came to a point in this country where toothpicks were being imported.
It's no longer 43.
Oh, it has increased. Toothpicks were being imported and so on. But he mentioned it 2 days ago when he was talking, that they've banned 43 items. Of course, they will keep adding to those items, aviation and so on, things that you don't need to bring in here. Now, the target was to have people start producing things like this. And then talking about the export window, you now have people packaging things like dried mango. You have things like dried pineapple, meaning that young people are able to now employ themselves in the absence of 9-to-5 jobs.
Based on what you are saying, would you now say that there's a successful marriage between monetary policy and fiscal policy, based on the examples you've cited?
Now, the jury is still out. The CBN governor himself said that they had a target to meet, but that he would be the first person to say that they didn't meet 100%. So it's work in progress. But we can score him 60, 70 more percent. But he himself considered, as he gave that speech on June 24, reading the 5-year plan, that not everything was achieved. Obviously, definitely, you plan, and then, of course, some challenges come up. There were some shocks because we're still dependent on oil to a great extent. And then, of course, some political issues and so on. But he considered that not 100% was achieved, but I can tell you definitely there is an ongoing marriage, if you permit me to use that.
Okay. Talking about achievements, the Central Bank of Nigeria is talking about financial inclusion, 95% financial inclusion.
Yeah.
Is that a realistic expectation?
Excellent. We're in the digital age, and the CBN governor on June 24 mentioned it specifically, that starting from June 5, 2014, when he came in June 2nd, read his 5-year plan, June 5, now, he said it there that we need to look at digital platforms. Talking about digital platforms, the one way you can achieve financial inclusion is not to allow brick and mortar bank branches. It's going to be very difficult. Now, in the age where you can transfer money on your phone, you need to start looking at digital platforms. And then, of course, Central Bank has created a department that is looking at something like that, where you are able to create digital platforms where people can begin to transfer money, can begin to do transactions, and then to also create confidence in the minds of the average Nigerian that those things can happen without fraud happening to them. So a lot is going on in that sector, and I believe strongly that if everybody teams up, what I expect the CBN governor to do is to work with the private sector, have a strategy session, have a meeting of minds, a handshake of sorts, so that everybody brings ideas to the table, and then we'll all work together as a team.
Now, very quickly and in closing, what would your projections be?
My projection actually is that if you look at the collateral registry, national collateral registry, mobile collateral registry, which has grown to about 400 billion, where you do not need to have fixed assets as collateral, which also the central bank governor and his team introduced within this past 5 years. Now, and he has said he's going to continue with that. Now, we have a situation where your gold and wristwatches and things of value can now be collateral for you to access finance. I expect him to continue with that. I expect him to also continue with the anchor borrower scheme. I expect him to also sit with the governors forum to do the example of what Lagos and KB did with the lake rice, and then so that you don't just produce and then we are at the mercy of those that are smuggling. I expect him to also continue with what he has said, the fact that those who are caught smuggling or dumping things here illegally would be blacklisted, and they cannot do financial transactions in Nigeria. So there's so much in that document, and I believe that if we actually implement it, there's progress ahead.
It has been a pleasure talking to you on the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina.
Meanwhile, the dollar hit a multi-month low against the euro and the yen on Tuesday on the prospects of monetary easing by the Federal Reserve. Let's see the exchange rate in Nigeria. That brings us to the end of this edition of Business Express. You can access all previous episodes on YouTube, and you can also communicate with us on Twitter, and the handle is NTA News Now, #BizExp. We value your feedback, so keep the mails coming and join us again on Friday. I am Amina Nujain. Bye for now.